secrets. They thrive in the shadows, especially behind bars. But what happens when those shadows are invaded? When the walls themselves can't protect you? This isn't just about a celebrity scandal. This is about power and the lengths it will go to uncover the truth, or to bury it. Welcome back to True Crime Buff HQ, where we dissect the cases that keep you up at night. Today, we're plunging into the Sean Combs saga and a jail cell search that has ignited a legal war. Get ready to question everything, because the truth is more twisted than you can imagine. Here at the HQ, we are once again drawn into the intricate legal web surrounding Sean Combs, the rapper and mogul currently facing serious criminal charges in New York. A judge has recently delivered a critical ruling, a decision that could significantly impact whether Combs' fundamental rights were violated during a jail cell search. Stay locked in with True Crime Buff HQ. And if you're new here, subscribe now. You won't want to miss what we uncover. We've been following this case closely, and today we will dissect the entire judicial order. We'll explore the potential ramifications this ruling holds for the upcoming criminal trial against Sean Combs. This isn't just a procedural matter. It strikes at the very heart of justice. Because, make no mistake, if prosecutors engage in misconduct, if they trample upon a defendant's constitutional rights, the consequences can be severe. We're talking about potential recusal of the prosecution team, evidence being thrown out, and in extreme scenarios, outright case dismissal. So, join us as we meticulously examine the order from Judge Aaron Subramanian of the Southern District of New York. This is a fascinating and complex legal battle, and the stakes are incredibly high. Sean Combs, as you know, is facing federal charges: racketeering, sex trafficking, and prostitution. His trial is looming, scheduled for May. And it's against this backdrop that Judge Subramanian's order begins, directly referencing a Bureau of Prisons sweep of the Metropolitan Detention Center, the MDC, that took place from October 28th to November 1st, 2024. During this sweep, a BOP investigator, identified as Investigator 1, took photographs, 19 pages of notes belonging to Combs. These weren't just casually glanced at. They were photographed and then sent to the government's filter team. Now, who is this filter team? Crucially, they are comprised of USAOs, Assistant United States Attorneys, who are deliberately kept separate from the investigation and prosecution of Combs's case. They are meant to be an independent layer, a safeguard. Their task, to review these notes and redact anything that might be considered privileged, attorney-client communications, or attorney work product. Only after this redaction were the notes passed on to the case team. And this team, the case team, is made up of the agents and USOs actively investigating and prosecuting Combs. Let's pause here and unpack this. Yes, there was a raid, a sweep at the MDC, the facility where Sean Combs is currently detained. The government insists this was a pre-planned operation, a general security measure, and not specifically targeting Sean Combs, even though his unit was searched. But Combs' legal team sees it differently. They suggest this raid was a pretext, a carefully orchestrated maneuver to target Sean Combs' unit specifically. The official line: a sweep for contraband. The MDC, as we know, has unfortunately been grappling with issues of violence, drugs, and weapons. 5. Hence, the need for such sweeps. So, this sweep happens. Investigator 1 photographs those 19 pages of Sean Combs' notes and sends them to the filter team. This filter team, in theory, is meant to be an independent, third-party entity, unconnected to the prosecutors directly involved in Combs's criminal case. Their mandate: to sift through the documents and ensure no privileged material, attorney-client communications, or work product makes its way to the prosecution. Judge Subramanian's order continues, detailing that in November, the government attempted to use some of the information gleaned from the filter team in their opposition to Combs' bail application. This is where things get even more contentious. Combs objected, vehemently, arguing that these notes contained privileged information, and that they were obtained in violation of his constitutional rights. The court, recognizing the seriousness of these allegations, held an emergency hearing. At this hearing, the government backpedaled, indicating they would not rely on the notes to oppose bail. Judge Subramanian went further, ordering the case team to destroy the notes in their possession, which they complied with. Let's break this down further. Initially, the prosecutors did intend to use these notes to argue against bail for Combs. Why? Because allegedly these notes seemed to suggest Combs was improperly contacting and paying off a witness in the case. A serious allegation, indeed. However, Judge Subramanian ultimately intervened, ordering the destruction of the 19 pages and barring the government from using them in their bail argument. But, even with this victory, it was a Pyrrhic one for Sean Combs. He was denied bail, nonetheless. Now, we often discuss unsettling stories here at True Crime Buff HQ, stories that highlight the darker aspects of our world. It's why we believe in partnering with sponsors who offer solutions, who can provide a measure of protection in an increasingly complex world. And that's why we're proud to partner with Delete Me. Did you know that your personal data is constantly being harvested and sold online by data brokers? It's a chilling reality. Anyone can buy your personal information, leaving you vulnerable to a host of threats, identity theft, phishing scams, and more. That's why we're pleased to introduce our sponsor, Delete Me. Delete Me is a service designed to protect your personal information. They actively search for your data on dozens of data broker sites, and they remove it. For me personally, Delete Me found my information on numerous listings, and they successfully removed it. And it's not a one-time fix. Delete Me continuously monitors these sites, ensuring your information doesn't reappear after the initial removal. Returning to the court order from Judge Subramanian, the legal battle was far from over. Combs's legal team then filed a motion for an evidentiary hearing and further relief. Their core argument, the seizure of his notes, violated the Fourth Amendment, and the government intentionally obtained privileged communications in violation of the Sixth Amendment. Let's delve into these constitutional amendments. The Fourth Amendment is your shield against unreasonable searches and seizures. The defense argued this protection extends to detainees. Even behind bars, in a jail or detention center, individuals retain a level of privacy. They have rights against warrantless searches unless there's a legitimate security concern. Then there's the Sixth Amendment, the cornerstone of the right to counsel. The defense argued that by seizing notes allegedly containing attorney-client communications and work product, the government unconstitutionally interfered with this sacred relationship. It invaded the defense camp, potentially violating Combs' ability to defend himself. The core argument, government interference, can cripple a defendant's right to effective assistance of counsel. Judge Subramanian, in his order, directly addressed these defense arguments. He noted that the government, in response to the motion, argued no violations occurred. Crucially, they also stated they would not offer the notes or any fruits of those notes as evidence. This was reiterated in a December 20th, 2024 ex parte letter, meaning filed by the prosecution alone, initially for the judge, but its contents were later shared with the defense. In this letter, the government outlined investigative steps taken upon receiving the notes, but reaffirmed they would not offer any evidence obtained from these steps in the prosecution of Combs. Furthermore, they intended to produce any evidence derived from these steps to the defendant, to the extent they hadn't already. In essence, the prosecution was stating, "We are not using anything we found in Combs' unit, and we've turned over everything we found to the defense." Judge Subramanian then meticulously addressed each of the defense arguments, starting with the Fourth Amendment claim. "The first question," he wrote, "is whether Investigator 1 violated Combs' Fourth Amendment rights when he searched Combs' cell and photographed the notes." He acknowledged that the usual remedy for a Fourth Amendment violation is suppression of evidence, meaning it's inadmissible at trial. However, Judge Subramanian declared this point moot. "It doesn't matter anymore," he stated, because the prosecution had already agreed not to use the notes, or anything derived from them, in their case. No fruit of the poisonous tree, no evidence from any investigation stemming from the notes. None of it would be used in their case in chief. Judge Subramanian did, however, issue a cautionary note. If the government later attempts to introduce evidence they promised not to use, Combs' defense attorneys could, and should, raise a Fourth Amendment objection. But, as things stood, there was basically nothing more to do regarding the Fourth Amendment claim. Next, Judge Subramanian turned to the alleged Sixth Amendment violations. He wrote that relief may be warranted under the Sixth Amendment if the government intentionally seeks to obtain a defendant's privileged communications to interfere with the attorney-client relationship. He framed the critical questions. Did the government intentionally invade Combs' relationship with his counsel? And, if so, has Combs been prejudiced? Meaning, was the case now tainted against Combs in some way? Judge Subramanian's conclusion. Under these circumstances, assuming without concluding that a portion of the unredacted notes was privileged, there are no grounds for relief. Why? Several key reasons underpinned his decision. Firstly, Judge Subramanian found no evidence of intentional government invasion of Combs' privilege. He emphasized that it was undisputed that the photographed notepads were separate from a manila folder, clearly marked legal, which Investigator 1 did not search. While Combs initially claimed the photographed notepads were also marked legal, the defense later retreated from this position, amidst confusion about when the handwritten legal labels were added. This point is crucial. As we covered during our live court hearing updates, Judge Subramanian appeared visibly miffed at the defense's lack of clarity on when and what was marked legal. He even scolded the defense, stressing the importance of accuracy in statements to the court. His concern was clear. If something was marked legal after the MDC sweep, it could appear as an attempt to retroactively shield non-privileged materials, making it seem like privileged communications were improperly seized. The timing of those legal markings became a central point of contention. Judge Subramanian, again, highlighted the defense's inconsistencies, underscoring the lack of clarity surrounding the legal markings. He continued in his order, pointing out, secondly, that Investigator 1 sent the photographs to the filter team, not the case team, for privilege review. While acknowledging that the filter team's privilege determinations might have been inaccurate, he found nothing indicating any intent to intrude on Combs's privilege. Thirdly, the judge noted the high-level and generic nature of the notes themselves. He observed that case-related commentary from Combs was often mixed in with clearly unprivileged information, like reminders about a family member's birthday and inspirational mantras. In essence, Judge Subramanian explained that the defense had to later provide context, explaining how specific notes were case-related and how they pertained to defense strategy. Because, on its face, without this context, it wasn't immediately clear what the notes were about. This lack of clarity further undermined the argument of intentional intrusion into privileged material. Finally, Judge Subramanian emphasized that the government promptly turned the photographs over to Combs, which further weighs against any inference of intentional malice. He stated that while this episode highlighted the need for the filter team to communicate with the defense before handing over potentially case-related materials to the case team, it did not bear the hallmarks of intentional intrusion or conduct that is manifestly lawlessly corrupt. This suggests the judge believed the filter team may have made mistakes in assessing what was privileged, mistakes in not alerting Combs' defense team sooner. But these mistakes, in his view, did not amount to a Sixth Amendment violation. However, there was another significant defense argument that Judge Subramanian addressed. The claim that Investigator 1, who searched Combs' notes and took the photographs, was actually an agent of the prosecutors. The defense suggested he was working in concert with them, feeding them jailhouse communications, acting as a kind of informant within the defense camp, investigating Sean Combs at their direction to gather evidence. Combs's notes and took the photographs was actually an agent of the prosecutors. The defense suggested he was working in concert with them, feeding them jailhouse communications, acting as a kind of informant within the defense camp, investigating Sean Combs at their direction to gather evidence. This, if true, would be a major problem. The defense argued in a prior filing. While the government says it didn't specifically direct Investigator 1 to search Mr. Combs' notes in advance of the raid, its conduct after he alerted them to the material suggests this could simply be part of an effort to distance the prosecutors from conduct they knew they couldn't legally participate in. The defense even referenced a prior court hearing transcript where Judge Subramanian himself had asked whether it was possible Investigator 1 thought of himself as an agent of the prosecution team. The defense continued in their filing. Was there a tacit understanding that he should do what he could to help the government develop evidence against Mr. Combs at any opportunity? Who is Investigator 1? Whose instructions was he following? They demanded the court order the government to produce Investigator 1's communications with the prosecutors and compel his testimony to fully understand his actions and motivations during the search, and to determine if the BOP sweep was a pretext for a targeted search of Combs's materials. Judge Subramanian responded to this argument in his order as well. He stated that he had ordered both the case team and Investigator 1 to furnish sworn affidavits, explaining the chain of events surrounding the MDC sweep. He also ordered the production of all written communications between the case team and Investigator 1 for an in-camera review. After careful review of these documents, Judge Subramanian concluded, there has been no intentional interference with Combs' attorney-client relationship. He noted that affidavits from Christy Slavic, a prosecutor on the case team, and Investigator 1 provided consistent narratives. While the specifics of these narratives were redacted in the judge's public order, the main idea, according to Judge Subramanian, was that there was nothing nefarious, nothing necessarily intentionally improper going on. Judge Subramanian then addressed the defense claim that the raid was a pretext to target Combs and gather evidence against him. He wrote in his order that 2 supervisors at the U.S. Attorney's Office were aware that the BOP planned to search Combs's unit during the security-motivated sweep, and they supported searching this unit, despite delays in searching other units. Slavic's affidavit indicated there was no direction from any SDNY personnel that Combs be under special scrutiny during the sweep of his unit, and no one at the U.S. Attorney's Office, including the case team, knew that Investigator 1 was part of the MDC sweep until after it was over. The case team, he noted, was informed of Investigator One's role following the sweep and promptly asked for the photographed notes to be sent to the filter team. His in-camera review of written communications between the case team and Investigator One tell the same story. Judge Subramanian added a footnote, stating that if it were true that searching Combs' cell was simply an effort to obtain evidence against him, it could be a Fourth Amendment violation. However, he reiterated that, if you look at the record, there's nothing to suggest that that was the motive behind this search. And, even if it were a Fourth Amendment issue, he restated his earlier point. It was moot, because the prosecution had agreed not to use anything from the search at trial. For the Sixth Amendment analysis, he concluded that the efforts made to protect Combs' privilege undermines the argument that there was some sort of intentional interference with the attorney-client relationship. In conclusion, regarding Investigator One, Judge Subramanian stated, "Far from an intentional prosecution-driven invasion into Combs' relationship with his attorneys, the record shows that Investigator One was doing his job as a BOP intelligence analyst and followed the established channels for reporting communications that pose safety concerns." He added that the case team was informed when appropriate and similarly followed the established channels for obtaining information and protecting Combs' privilege. He concluded, "Care was taken to shield Combs' communications with his attorneys from the case team. None of this suggests that Investigator One deliberately set out to or was instructed to invade Combs' attorney-client relationship and impede his defense." Finally, Judge Subramanian addressed the issue of prejudice. To establish a Sixth Amendment violation, it's not just about intentional interference, but also whether Combs was prejudiced as a result. Judge Subramanian again concluded no. He stated that even if there was intentional interference, absent absolutely corrupt government conduct, Combs would have to show this would unfairly bias the jury against him or unfairly taint the case against him. He'd have to demonstrate that violations of his attorney-client privilege would lead to evidence presented at trial against him. But, Judge Subramanian reiterated, the government promised not to use the notes, or anything derived from them, in their case against Combs. He argued that because the government provided information about this investigation, both the court and the defense were now ready to flag any suspect evidence the prosecution might attempt to introduce, holding them accountable to their promise. Judge Subramanian concluded that, at this point in the case, Combs' claims of prejudice were wholly conjectural, based on general allegations of taint unconnected to any specific evidence to be presented at trial, and thus insufficient for a finding of prejudice. Regarding the defense request for a hearing, Judge Subramanian deemed it unnecessary. He stated the extensive paper record, affidavits, in-camera review, provided a sufficient basis for his ruling. He noted the lengthy affidavit from a case team member based on her review of communications and conversations, and Investigator One's affidavit. These documents, combined with the in-camera review, presented a clear factual narrative that Combs had the opportunity to respond to. Therefore, a live hearing was not needed. Judge Subramanian also rejected the defense argument for a hearing to determine if any prosecution evidence was derived from the notes, the fruit of the poisonous tree issue. He acknowledged the concern about the case team using privileged notes to develop leads, but stated that case law requires a defendant to establish a clear connection between improperly obtained privileged information and the prosecution's evidence. Judge Subramanian found Combs doesn't come close to making such a showing, especially given the government's disavowal of using the notes. He called Combs' claims speculating about taint without demonstrating a concrete link. He reiterated the generic nature of the notes made it unlikely any improper use had occurred or could occur. Judge Subramanian concluded by cautioning the government to remain mindful of Combs' privilege and adhere to filter team processes. He recommended the filter team clear potentially privileged documents with the defense before turning them over to the case team, but found no current need for a special master to oversee this. So, there you have it. The judge's ruling. Not a win for Sean Combs. No Fourth or Sixth Amendment violations found, no hearing granted. The government cannot use the notes in their case, notes that potentially evidenced Combs contacting a witness relevant to witness tampering allegations within the racketeering charge. But, given the breadth of the racketeering charges and the extensive evidence the prosecution will likely present, it appears this specific point, these notes, may not be a decisive factor in the larger case. It doesn't seem, at least to this analyst, to be a major loss for the prosecution. An interesting update, indeed. We will, of course, continue to follow this case closely. That's all for now, here at True Crime Buff HQ. Thank you for joining us. Stay subscribed to True Crime Buff HQ on YouTube. Wherever you are watching us from, stay informed, stay vigilant, and we'll speak to you next time.